Alright, so here we go. In reverse order, the top 10 best-selling motorcycles of over 500cc in capacity from the last year in the UK. If you were following the sales figures during the year, the result might surprise you. It's also worth adding before we start that this data is based upon new bikes registered, not actual transactions with a customer. So there could well be bikes registered by dealers that are still sat on the forecourt, but it's the closest thing we'll get, and it's still good enough to get a rough idea. First up at number 10 is the BMW S1000XR, which is their road-focused crossover touring bike, powered by a derivative of the inline-4 used in their S1000RR sports bike and a similar frame too. Jacked up suspension and a decent fairing make it much more spacious and comfortable than your average sports bike, and that's pretty much the secret to its success. You get most of the power and handling of a superbike in a package that won't break your back. It did have a decent update for 2020 with new gear ratios, a bit less weight and some improvements in tech, and so that'll have contributed to healthy sales figures, but its closest competitor, Yamaha's Tracer 900, has been refreshed for this model year, so it'll be interesting to see which one comes out on top in 2021. Now, it's no surprise to see the Yamaha MT07 in this list, as it packs in loads of fun at a bargain price starting at just £6,899. It's a super simple bike with no fancy specs or gadgets to speak of, but it's the punchy, playful 689cc parallel twin engine that's the star of the show. Now, this is the bike that Triumph have taken aim at with their new Trident 660, and my first impressions of that bike were pretty damn good. But the MT07 has also been updated for 2021 with Euro 5 compliance, bigger front discs, wider bars, and new upgraded tyres, so I'll have to ride that too before I can declare a winner. The 790 Duke is similar to the MT07 in many respects, but just takes everything up a notch. Its parallel twin makes about 30 horsepower more at 105, and it packs some pretty premium electronics like lean-sensitive ABS, traction control, and engine braking, all managed through its TFT dash. As a result, you'd have to have paid a couple of grand more than the Yamaha, but for the more experienced rider, it's probably worth it. KTM did launch its successor, the 890 Duke R, later in the year, and I got a chance to borrow one and absolutely loved it. The engine delivers perfectly, and in terms of handling, it just goes exactly where you want it to. Just a couple of weeks ago, they then announced the 890 Duke, which is the non-R version with a slightly lower spec, and so at the time of writing this video, some of the dealers are clearing out their stock of 790 Dukes for just $7.5 grand, down from the original $9 grand, which is just incredible value. The Africa Twin got a significant update for 2020, including a bump in capacity to 1084cc, and as such got a boost in power from 94 to 101 horsepower. There's a new chassis too, upgraded electronics, and a nice visual restyling to boot. Last year, I borrowed both the regular base model with the manual gearbox, as well as the big touring-focused Adventure Sports with the dual-clutch transmission, and I really enjoyed both of them. For me, it was the punchy, smooth delivery of the engine with a really distinctive pulsing exhaust note. So of course, I'm really looking forward to the Rebel 1100 this year, which will be powered by the same engine, and there's also talk of a crossover called the CB1100X, which would compete with the BMW S1000XR we've just talked about. Now that would be an exciting prospect. In 6th place, it's another Beamer, and this time it is indeed the S1000RR sports bike. This is really the benchmark in its category, and if you look at any group tests or head-to-heads in the press over the last year or two, it pretty much always comes out on top. It had a major overhaul in 2019 with BMW's shift cam variable valve timing system, enabling them to make over 200 horsepower peak, and combined with its handling and tech, plus the fact that it starts from $15.5 grand, and the S1000RR makes a pretty irresistible package. I can't see anything coming in the works from other manufacturers that will realistically be able to topple it from the peak of the out-and-out sports bike market. If, however, you're looking for something ever so slightly more leisurely, then meet the Kawasaki Ninja 1000 SX. It's the 2020 version of the Z1000 SX that came before it, which has been a bestseller for Kawasaki for many years in the UK. Plenty of power, but with a fairly relaxed riding position, make it an ideal all-rounder for commuting, touring, or a bit of weekend fun. The 2020 update improved the handling and added a more comfortable saddle, as well as cruise control, a quick shifter, and a TFT dash as standard. At just over 11 grand, it's pretty well priced too, so you can see why they sold so well. Based upon the same CP2 parallel twin engine as the MT07 that we saw earlier in the list, the Tenere has shaken things up massively in the middleweight adventure market. I see a lot of comments here on YouTube that adventure bikes are now too heavy and too expensive and too laden with unnecessary gadgets. What people actually want is a simple, affordable machine that can do a bit of everything, including some proper off-roading. And Yamaha seem to have really hit the mark with the Tenere 700. It's significantly cheaper than most of its rivals, and they've done that by keeping the tech to a minimum. In fact, there's only really ABS in terms of rider aids, and you can of course disable that if you so wish. So you really have to hand it to Yamaha for this one. They seem to have listened to the market, delivered on what people wanted, and have been rewarded with the sales they deserve. Now, I said there might be a bit of a surprise in this list, and that's because the Interceptor was getting a lot of hype at one point, being billed as the UK's best-selling bike. And it was in June for 1 month, but over the course of the year, it settled in third. Now, that's not to detract from what Enfield have achieved here. Much like the Tenere, they've built a simple, good-looking bike that doesn't cost a fortune, and customers seem to love it. Although it's not the most powerful bike in the retro market at just 47 horsepower, the price is pretty unbeatable, starting at just over 5.5 grand. And to be honest, most people buying a bike in this category probably don't really care about performance figures. The Interceptor must have impacted upon Triumph sales, as it's almost a carbon copy of the T100 but over a couple of grand cheaper. And I must admit, I've not ridden one yet, but it's probably the most requested review in the comments of my videos, so I'll be sure to make that happen in 2021. The other thing that was a bit misleading about that Interceptor headline is that the numbers for the BMW R1250 GS and the GS Adventure are actually split out in the sales charts. So although the 1,303 units that the GS sold is only a touch more than the Interceptor, if you combine it with the 1,374 that the GS Adventure sold, you get 2,677 for both models, which is way beyond any other bike. That's a hugely impressive number, especially when you consider that many of the bikes in the top 10, like the MT07, Tenere, Ninja 1000 SX, and Interceptor, are somewhat built to a price, so naturally you'd expect higher volumes. The GS is far more premium in its market position, and yet it still sells in numbers that outstrip any other bike by a long stretch. The last major update was in 2019 with the addition of the shift cam tech we've already mentioned, and this year it's been updated again with Euro 5 compliance and eco riding mode, better electronics, and a bunch more accessories, as well as this awesome looking 40th anniversary paint job. It's hard to see anything short of a miracle reversing this sales trend, so you can expect to see it top of next year's charts as well. And that rounds off a list that BMW pretty much dominated. Not only did they have the best-selling adventure, sports, and crossover bikes, but the R1250 RT was the best-selling touring bike too, with 489 units shifted. 45% of sales in the top 10 belong to them, and 16.5% of all bikes over 500cc, with 7,216 units sold in total over the course of the year. Super impressive numbers from BMW, but as always, I'd love to hear your pick in the comments below. Money no object, which of the top 10 would you go for? And then what if it was your own hard-earned cash? I bet there'll be two very different answers, so let me know in the comments, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.